It's by truckers for truckers. This is the Channel 19 Experience. Let's hit the road.
All right, this week on the show, we've got a Minnesotan, a fellow Minnesotan special guest, Todd Waldron. It's funny, a person who we've probably orbited, our orbits have been probably pretty close to one another over the years, right in each other's backyard, but we kind of accidentally met one another down at Matt's, standing at the same booth, talking, listening to the same kind of pitch about product features from another company, and turns out we're nearly neighbors. So welcome to the show, Todd. Nice to see you again.
Tony, it's great to be here. It's a small world in logistics, but yet can seem so big sometimes. But yeah, it was pretty funny when I'm like standing there talking to this vendor and Tony's up there peppering him with these strong operational questions. I'm like, man, this guy knows his stuff. And then we started talking after that, and it's been great to get to know you better since. So it's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, so my audience has heard a bit about my trucking story and the Minnesota roots of it, but let's hear about your logistics story and how you've come up through the business.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started my career at C.H. Robinson and worked in produce transportation brokerage. And so grew up in transportation brokerage, moving freight from the west to the northeast, produce off the west coast. So that was a great way to kind of cut my transportation teeth. I worked in account management and then also led a consolidation team, an LTL at CH as well. I moved over to JB Hunt then in about 2013, I want to say it was, and opened the brokerage branch for JB Hunt up in Minnesota. A couple years after that, relocated down to corporate down in Arkansas, where I worked on JB Hunt 360, marketplace development, and a lot of other fun stuff down there at corporate. Then I had the great opportunity. So I spent 6 years at Hunt, four of which were down in Arkansas, and then had the opportunity to come back up to Minnesota. And one of my good friends' dad had founded Q Carriers back in 1981 and was looking to retire again. And so my friend was gracious enough to consider me to be CEO and run the organization. So I stepped into that in 2019, where we led that through 2024, and ended up selling the organization or selling the company in 2024. So we're running about 115 trucks when I got there, refrigerated food and beverage, and then we had a brokerage division as well. And so that was a great run in transportation, and that the asset side of trucking and refrigerated trucking. And then I joined Truckstop after we sold the organization in end of 2024. Had the opportunity. I knew Brent Hutto very well, and he was gracious enough to connect me. And yeah, I've been here since, and really been enjoying the technology side of things and looking at how can I take all of my 16 years in transportation and logistics background and apply technology to improve the lives of the people we interact with, particularly the drivers and the carriers. And so now, as Vice President of Carrier Experience here at Truckstop, that's my sole focus: is how do we, as an organization, make a more streamlined product offering and processes that support the driver and that support the carriers in executing their business. And so it's been just a lot of fun to apply all that learning into solutions that can continue to improve the lives of the people we work with.
Right, right. That's what it's all about, right? Learn
Yes.
some things, sometimes the hard way, sometimes the easy way, but and then come back and apply them and try to build a better value somewhere else with that information.
Yep. Absolutely.
Well, one thing I wanted to ask you before we jump into some of the truck stop features that have come out, with your background in brokerage in particular, and C.H. Robinson and JB Hunt, like one of the things I see get questioned a lot on the trucking social media sides is like, why can't we just get rid of brokers? Why, like they're just vipers, they're just stealing money from hardworking truckers. Like that we should just eradicate Earth from brokerages and 3PLs altogether. And I wanted, because you've worked on that
Yeah.
side much more than I have. Like you have, there's a sales pitch, right? I've been on the receiving
Yeah,
end.
yeah.
I worked for
Sure.
Cargill and managed, flour milling for them for a little while, logistics, truck logistics. And so there's a sales pitch, right? There's a reason for these companies to exist, but you lived
Yep.
it for, a decade, more than a decade. So what's the pitch? Why did they exist?
Yeah, I could talk on this for days. But there's a few components to it I look at is one, yes, let's get this out of the way. There are bad performing, ill-intentioned brokers out there that are trying to take advantage or are not operating in a ethical way. As the same way as there's carriers and shippers that do the same thing as well, that are not operating in something that would be either ethically sound or also like respecting the needs of the other folks, right? And so if we separate that conversation for a minute and we look at the ones that are trying to better the industry and perform a service, the value of the broker has evolved over the last 10 to 15 years. People like C.H. Robinson has really pioneered this dedicated hands-on approach to brokerage where previously and many years ago it was really just a hands off. They were just passing the shipment on, making a margin, and then to the shippers, kind of hands on. I'm just the broker, you got to contact the carrier. And
Mhm.
so that evolved into a more hands-on service oriented approach. So one of the values of the brokers is to say, hey, I can provide an additional layer of communication and service that benefits the shipper but also benefits the carrier and the driver. So the driver doesn't have to worry about, making as many of the communications that shippers have come to expect in their daily lives. But one of the primary roles that brokerages have fit into the value component is aggregating the small carriers, the 1 to 5 trucks, and being able to vet and manage that level of carriers. Shippers were not able to effectively build a transportation team that could effectively utilize those carriers. So one way to look at it is saying, as a smaller carrier, it's often incredibly difficult to get access to freight from those large shippers, and
Mhm.
brokers enable the ability to do that. So if I can find a broker that cares about the how I move my truck, where I want to be, and respects me, and also advocates on behalf of me to the broker or to the shipper, there's a lot of health that can be found in that relationship. EQ Carriers at 115 trucks, right? We had our strategy of being shipper direct in the majority of our freight, but we would still utilize brokers and have good relationships with solid brokers where it made sense, whether it was for backhaul or it was for loose season times to fill maybe 15% of our head haul shipments. There was still that value in the relationships that they had and bringing that connection to the shippers that they might have been worked with. It's also evolved the technology space. Brokers have really developed a strong portfolio of technology, and there's new vendors that are providing a lot of technology to the brokers, so they can provide a level of data analytics, as well as information and automation and things like that they're focused on in developing. And so that there's obviously some carriers that can do that too, but some of the smaller carriers don't always have the resources to add
Yeah.
all of those layers of technology. And so I think there's multiple aspects to it. The other thing I really hit on is the margin discussion. That at the end of the day, brokers aren't making some exorbitant amount of margin. Some are, but some might be
And
in
sometimes, like,
in
yeah.
a small window where you see a shipment that has a certain margin, but brokerage margin is managed throughout the year where there's ebbs and flows to that, especially those that are managing contracted freight. And so it's an incredibly difficult thing to price contracted business to a shipper to sustain through the year. And so there's a risk component to that also has to be managed within the brokerage margin. But the average margin might be 15% in the industry, but the net profitability or net margin is only in the 4 to 6% in a healthy performing brokerage or a fairly good state of brokerage. So
Yeah. And the brokers, like you said, they're providing a service, right? They're providing updates, just like a shipper. As a large shipper, when I was in that role, I didn't want to deal with 500 three-truck companies. When you're, a 30-truck company, excuse me, you also don't want to deal with 900 shippers just because that's how many different people you actually hauled freight for, right? So
Yep.
there's a mutually beneficial helpfulness that the broker provides. And I think I'd like to say that I had a plan when I asked that question, more of a blind squirrel wandering around, but it has a direct relationship to what you're doing right now and the role that
Yeah.
Truckstop plays in the industry, right? Of facilitating the ease of interactions, the safety of interactions, all those things.
Yep, absolutely. When you look at like from a brokerage standpoint too, the shipper has evolved where they used to have brokers just as an overflow model. What they realized is that if you have brokers on the routing guide in a sustainable, kind of long-term relationship, that you don't see the ebbs and flows and the peaks and valleys, they can smooth those out a little bit. But then you step into then the load board from like a truck stop perspective, which is one of the products and tools that we use to kind of help the relationship between brokers and carriers. Um, but that's another thing that sometimes will get a bad rap, right? And the noise often takes the external conversation because everybody's talking about that, whether it's the fraud or things that are happening. And fortunately, our load board has gotten very great reviews and feedback as far as not having the fraud present, on the load board. But that negative connotation, it's like a load board is a tool and a thing that can really support this relationship between brokers and carriers, and they can also introduce people into deeper levels of relationships. And so a lot of the tools and the releases that we're coming out with are saying, how can we have additional features that make this more beneficial to the carriers and the brokers and also the relationships and bringing them together. And so you'll see that in some of the features that we'll talk about that we're coming out with.
Yeah, let's start to talk about some of those features that you guys just came out with and how they help facilitate these sorts of things for both
Yeah.
sides of the equation, right? The whole logistics network benefits when everybody's operating as efficiently as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing that some brokers have requirements is a certain age, a tenure of authority, having your authority for a certain amount of time. And so one of the challenges we were seeing in our carriers is they would find a shipment and then call a broker and then run into this requirement and they might not meet that requirement. So we added an age authority age filter that allows a carrier to filter on showing them just loads and shipments that will work with their authority level. So if I have 6 months of authority, I can filter to see the brokers that will work with me's loads. So it saves a lot of time. We've gotten great feedback on this. It saves a lot of time in navigating where I'm at in my tenure as an organization or as a carrier, and who are the people that I'm going to work best with.
Yeah. And the primary driver around that is just with the amount of fraud that we're seeing in the industry, it's just people are leery. Everybody's got a different risk tolerance. And
Yep.
so, there are certain people who just say, you know what, 6 months, a year, whatever your age on your MC, um, you know, how long you've had it is a criteria that, they're going to set their policy for and kind of stick to that line, right?
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. And so, that's kind of one of the downfalls of, I mean, there's a lot of downfalls, but the downfalls for the good people that want to start a good, relevant, healthy business is that with the increase in fraud, there's a lot more skepticism that has then
Yeah.
impacted people's ability to start a trucking company or start, running their own truck. And so this is one way to help folks at least have manage and have visibility. And then the other thing I'm kind of working on trying to figure out is, well, how do we add legitimacy and some type of a footprint to those folks, the drivers that are new, but have a long-standing history as a company driver at a certain company or something like that. How can we make that resume, if you will, more present and more, open to the brokers they want to work with, so you get the full picture? Because right
Yeah,
now you see
almost.
that authority age and it just looks like, oh, you're just new to this and you just bought a truck and decided to go hit the road, right? Like,
Yeah, you could have been an owner operator. You could have been a master contractor with 20 trucks under Landstar for
yep,
20 years.
yep,
But you go and fill out that, authority application and it looks like you just fell off the turnip truck, right? And
yep,
you're the new guy. Yeah, I mean
yep,
that's where it's interesting. You look at platforms like Reddit, for example, right?
uh-huh,
And like you can set the basically the tolerance for your group that says you have to have so much air quotes karma. You have to have contributed so much to the group as like a guest or a commenter before we'll let you post anything because we don't want people just jumping in and spamming us with their,
famine, yep,
buy our insurance or buy our, fuel plan or whatever the case, right? So there's
yep,
almost like that kind of mafiosa, vouch for somebody to get them in the network, right?
yeah, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, that's one vein. Load popularity. Recognizing the challenge of competing for popular loads, and so this is meant to kind of show and assess the views on a shipment and externalize how many views are out there on a shipment, and see the ones that are going to be highly competitive or the ones that are going to be less competitive that might have a better chance at winning and getting in with a new broker or interacting with somebody. So that's kind of like just a visibility of to some of the data and activity happening, which is something we want to continue to do. A
There's
backhaul search,
nothing
but
more disappointing than getting excited about a load. You found one and then, you don't realize that, yeah, 50 other people got the same feeling
right on
about
the
that
same
load. So you better
Yep.
move fast, right?
Yeah. Yep. Yep. It gives you a sense of the timeliness to respond. Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure.
And then, I mean, there's a simple thing like backhaul search where we were seeing, people might search location A to B, and then search the inverse. And so we just inserted a swap button, right? Something simple, but just making it easier for them to interact with. So you can hit the swap button and it swaps it into searching for a backhaul.
Hmm.
So that was one thing. And then we've been talking a lot and working a lot on recommendations. Recommendations is a broad term. A lot of people use recommendations, load recommendations. And so the intuitiveness and how it works and interacts is really the key to it. And so one of the ones we rolled out was a similar load recommendations, to look at, similar to what I've hauled in the past or what the carrier search criteria is. We want to help them discover more relevant opportunities. And then we're working on like a lane suggestions. So carriers will often search to anywhere, some will that have more flexible destinations. And so we're going to want to provide some suggestions that are loads that it might be the rate is better or the shipment has better characteristics or things like that. And so if you're searching to anywhere, we might say, hey, we want to highlight some of the suggested ones that we see that might be a better fit for you. And so just adding additional tools, intelligence research to kind of help make the search a little bit easier, because you'll often there's often a lot of loads that can return on results. And so we want to just highlight ones that we think would be a great fit for you.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the challenges, right? Of, a long time ago when I started, when you started, the tools were very minimal. And I
Yep.
was going to ask you about like how does your team or you go about looking at some of these? Because right, you can add a million features, right? A million search criteria, and now you got like 3 pages to scroll through of where was that
Yes.
search and how do I do a semicircle radius search that faces to the east out of Memphis, things like that.
Yep.
How do you, so the complexity of all the things that people ask for, and but also trying to make it so that the software is still actually usable and doesn't drive people nuts.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's a lot that goes into that. Is we have a lot of mediums for gaining customer feedback, right, and getting thoughts and ideas, whether it's an NPS survey or it's an in-app feedback experience, or we have some forms that are even a simple way to provide feedback. And so we have a process for collecting all of that, and then the committees that discuss and talk about what that feedback relates to, whether it's a process where it could be in the customer service vein, it could be in the the sales vein or some other vein, or it could be in the product side. And how do we, one, communicate to understand with that person that provided the feedback, but then two, incorporate it or see where it fits on the product roadmap and see how it aligns. And then from there, it really takes on a life of its own in trying to say what are the details. I always say in transportation, the devil's in the details. And so an idea, like you get a title of a product or something, and it's like, that's a great idea, but then something X, Y, and Z could make it so it's not even relevant to the driver
Yeah.
because we didn't account for that. And so there's that's a part of my role too, is stepping in and saying, okay, as we dig into releasing this product, what are the specifications we're building into it? How's it going to look? Where does it live in the workflow? And how does it interact with the rest of the product and the rest of the features? And does this deliver the value that the person who gave the feedback intended it to deliver? Is the things that you have to connect, because
Yeah.
scope creep and everything else in technology development can often take you on this path where you end up way over here and you're like, well, this is so and so feature, and you're like, yeah, but the person who recommended this meant this,
Yeah, they
but
was trying to solve a
we've
totally different problem.
slowly evolved into this. Yes.
Yeah.
And so that's where I love being a part of that. And so that involves not only us talking through it, but then also reaching out to folks and carriers we work with and relationships we have to get their feedback and input. And so that's a big part of the process as well.
So what challenges that, especially on the carrier side and the from the one truck owner operator to the smaller carriers, like what are the things that you guys are working on coming up next to continue to make their experience the best possible one you can provide?
Yeah, we have a lot coming up and a lot we're working on. And so as we release, Scott Moskrept, our founder, stepped back in as
Yeah.
interim CEO and is really pushing a fast pace of product delivery and saying and customer focused and how we listen to and react to our customers. So there's a lot happening on our product side. Some of the things are the lane suggestions I mentioned coming up, factorability data, the ability for a factoring customer to be able to see which brokers are factorable, which not only tells you which ones you can factor against, but it also gives financial legitimacy to brokers because you know that they've gone through some financial approval process by a factoring company to be able to get that banner or that mark.
Right.
And then also like RMIS, our vetting and onboarding software, the ability to be able to see which loads are posted by brokers I'm already onboarded with. And so now I can see, wait, who am I going to have to go through the onboarding process with again versus who am I already set up with? And being able to see that in the load board is another feature. So you'll see those are just some examples of the things that are coming down the pike that are like, we continue to take out the friction between the carriers and the brokers, as well as enable a deeper level of trust and truth to happen in that. And so the more information that's relevant to being able to interact together, and so there's a lot more happening from there. Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. You're going to see a lot of innovation and new things continuing to come from us here in the coming months. So.
Yeah, and from a practical level, right? I mean, when as a driver, as an owner operator waiting on dispatch, you know, you're sitting around going, why the heck is it taking so long? Or I get the dispatch, hey, I got a load, just give me a minute and I'll get you the details. And then 3 hours later, you're still sitting there twiddling your thumbs, right? These are some of the things that
Yep.
are create the thumb twiddling moments that
Tension.
you're trying
Yep.
to pull that time out of there and go, hey, we're
Yep.
already Bro, we already know each other. I already know that you have some financial credibility, so I'm not sitting here hemming and hawing doing, I mean, now, before you might be calling your friends, but now you might be Googling, looking for bad reviews. Is this broker gonna stiff
Yeah.
me? All that kind of stuff. Or these guys crooks? You get that instantaneous feedback. You can move on faster and get people doing what they, makes money in this business.
Yep. And that's the thing that perpetuates the negative relationship,
Hmm.
because your narrative starts to be they're screwing me, they're looking for a lower carrier to pay, they're looking for somebody else, which could be the truth. But coming from and sitting in that broker seat, the things that can happen or go wrong, whether it's technology and I didn't get the rate confirmation or the paperwork, or there's an issue with the paperwork, or there's a system issue in getting it approved. It's like there's a slew of things, or shipper wants to change the load but didn't tell you this, and you're trying to confirm, but they won't answer their phone, and you're trying to, and so it's like I always say, like, assume good intent. There could be something that's a positive or negative that's happening behind the scenes, but assume good intent,
Yeah.
and see how communication can help enable that. And so from a broker's perspective, I would always teach over communicate. If you're having an issue with the insurance or the this person that you're trying to work on, communicate that to the carrier so that they know you're working on it. In the same way, like in customer service, if I send an email to customer service, getting a response that it was received is so, like, it's mind easing. In the same way that carriers and brokers work together and everything is some
Yeah.
people would receive these and just sit and think that the other person should assume they're working on it. And
Yeah.
that's just not how communication should be handled. It's like over communicate, less assumptions, no assumptions. It really helps to say, hey, let's give each other the benefit of the doubt and not assume negative intent until that person proves us wrong in doing something that actually is proven to be a not good business practice.
Right. Yeah, and I mean it's funny, right? Last week I was talking with Danger Dave because he had a myriad of breakdowns on his load from I forget where he was coming out of. I think it was somewhere down by Texas, going up to Buffalo, New York, and he made it to Nashville, and it was breakdown after breakdown, the record breakdown, he'd break down, then he'd go
Yep.
50 miles up the
Yep.
road, check engine light comes on, and the thing, it's funny, like his commentary mirrored your commentary, which was over communicate, don't assume, if you're upfront and explain things to people like these things happen. And yeah, can we still
Yep.
get frustrated or, impatient or have things that you need to get done? Yes, absolutely. But
Yes.
what all those things help do is root out those assumptions, the erroneous assumptions,
Yeah.
and get everybody on the same page. Because just like
Yeah.
if you're a driver, there's a lot to navigate to make a load happen. It's not just, Chicago to Kansas City and, it's 8 hours of peace and joy,
Yep.
right? Um, the flip side is also true that just because the person hit the send button on a dispatch to your truck doesn't mean that they have 8 hours of peace and joy on the
Yep.
paperwork, on the updating, on
Absolutely.
all the other things, right? Or the brokers in the same shoes, right? There's a lot of stuff
Yep.
that goes on that you just don't see. And quite frankly, everybody should be happy you don't have to see it or participate in it as little as possible. That's what tools
Yeah.
like you're talking about help facilitate, right?
Yep.
As a driver, I
Yep.
don't want to know, hey, I don't want to hear their sob story about, well, we did this with this broker that doesn't seem to pay us and,
Yep.
or, has ghosted us now or, everybody benefits from good, transparent, data-rich relationships that are as easy as possible for everybody.
Absolutely. And it goes both ways. A good friend of mine runs a trucking company in northern Minnesota, just posted on LinkedIn about this interaction with a broker that they had a legitimate truck breakdown, was in the shop, could prove it, et cetera, et cetera. They notified as soon as they found out, right? They did all of the right things. And then the broker comes back and says they're going to enter a freight guard on them. And it's like, eh, you can't just go from 0 to 60 and assume everybody's bad and trying to cheat the system just because we have so much of that fraud and mistrust happening. It's like let's take a breather on both sides and try to get the positive great people working together in positive ways. And that's something that really drives and motivates me is being in brokerage, being in asset, and being in carriers inside of things. Is like there's a purpose and healthiness to these two different roles in the industry. And I'm just like, how do we make this more enjoyable for both sides? Transportation's a tough
Yeah,
business, but
it
you know,
is.
our vision became at Q Carriers delivering an enjoyable transportation experience. And everybody, when I brought up enjoyable, everybody was looking around the room like, this is trucking, man. Let's, but I'm like, wait a minute, like you no matter our shop, our director of the shop said, raises their trucks are broken down when they come to me. What's enjoyable about that? I said, if you asked every one of these drivers when their trucks broke down where the shop they want to bring their truck to, they'd be able to name a shop because that shop was respectful, billed them correctly, treated them well.
Mhm.
Something made, in spite of the circumstance being poor, made it a more enjoyable experience than it could have been. And so it's like that's what it's all about for me is like, how do we continue to make this more enjoyable? Because it's such a necessary component of our economy, but yet it can be just so challenging in many ways to just execute and make things happen. So,
Yeah. And it's in those toughest moments, like your friend, the carrier, it's in
yep,
those toughest moments where you have the opportunity to build the strongest bonds if you're open to it, right? Because
absolutely.
you don't have that much trust with somebody. It trust builds pretty slow if everything goes okay, right?
Yep,
There's nothing extraordinarily good, nothing extraordinarily bad. Okay, if you do that 1,000 times, then I start to trust, or 100 times or whatever
yep,
your magic number is. Okay, then we have a certain level of trust. But if we went
yep,
through something tough together, and I know how you react in tough situations, and that you're communicative and respectful, and all those things in the goofy scenarios that pop up in trucking all the time,
yep.
I know a lot more about you a lot faster than any other way.
Yes, I've built so many stronger relationships that were in a very negative situation with like shippers or carriers, but the way you handle and they see your dedication through that can really turn those into even more positive relationships.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And sometimes you got to be tough. There are times for that in this business, but there's also a lot of times for grace and being generous. That
Yes.
that you can build a lot and gain a lot in the long run, right? And I
Yep.
think that kind of goes circling back to kind of where you started too, which was around just the difference between the people who are out for a one-time gain as fast as possible and the actors who are actually trying to build something mutually beneficial. Because that broker
Yep.
who thinks he may be doing himself a solid by, putting a fleet guard on a particular carrier, he actually just shrunk his available capacity for his business in the future. And
Yep. Yep.
he's likely costing himself money.
Yep. Absolutely. It's a short-term mindset, short-term mentality.
Yeah, just for an
Yeah.
emotional response, most likely over something that was frustrating or.
Yep.
And yes, brokers take heat. I was on the shipper side and and CH Robinson was one of my vendors, my
Yeah.
3PLs out of Topeka. And,
Yeah.
there were times when I gave them hell,
Yeah.
but there was also times they bailed me out of 1,000 icky
Yeah.
scenarios of, you know, and a lot of it's like bailing people out of scenarios that are actually good things like, hey, our customers ordered way more than we could have planned for. We have way
Yeah.
more freight to haul. Can you help? Right? Like
Yep.
those are the bailouts that are good, right? The salesman's over
Yep.
there, they're high-fiving each other. We did it. We got some more sales and we're over there going, "Oh my God, like what do you think trucks grow on trees?" But they kind of do when you have
Yeah.
a partner who's
Yeah.
got access to a much bigger network than you have organically, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
So,
There's a lot of value in that.
so there's the lesson today. Trucks do grow on trees. No, man. Well, it was great talking to you. I love hearing about your new features. I hope to get you back, as more stuff comes out and talk about, where Truckstop's going and all the cool stuff you bring to the marketplace especially for, the carriers, because that's what your focus is on.
Absolutely. Would love to. I appreciate you having me on. It's been great chatting.
Thanks.